And then, of course, you start to question other things about the book. You know, so this is Seneca. Even these most kind of mainstream central sources, Seneca, Cicero, obviously we've already repeatedly talked about, Plato and Socrates. You can be dealing with sources that are deeply dishonest, that are nothing but lies.
Doomed Republic, our second Q&A about ancient texts, modern politics, and the process and product of living the life of the mind. But I warn you, our first podcast, talking about polyamory.
Number 4.
So much of your knowledge, your character even, seems to come out of the experience of reading books that you would ultimately not recommend people to read.
Go on, yeah.
How much value is there in reading authors who are stupid, bad, wrong, etc.? Surely there is value in reading the Communist Manifesto, for example, if for no other reason than to be able to articulate why it is stupid.
So let's just pause. We're halfway through the question here. I want to challenge the assumptions, the sort of charitable assumptions that arise from the mere format of the book, right? Like there's a sense in which the book itself has a mystique, and that mystique may increase as books become a smaller and smaller part of our digitized lives. In the ancient world, people are semi-literate, and books are seen as more magical, not less, because so few people can read them, and so few people can afford them and own them. And so, what you've just said to me about a book, you would never say that about a person or about spoken communication, right? If someone lies to you, are you going to say, surely there's some value in being lied to? So no, there is no value in reading a book that lies to you. There is no value in reading a book that's deeply dishonest and misleading. And this is especially true of a work like the Communist Manifesto. So, we can throw out a whole bunch of examples here. Would you rather read a deeply dishonest and misleading account of what happened under Mao Zedong, mass starvation, so on, in communism? Or would you read an account debunking it, cross-examine, so on and so forth? It's just not the case that there's any value in being lied to. And there's no value in hearing the rantings and ravings of a lunatic, reading a book written by a madman, right? I know it's easy to romanticize this as if the process of being deceived and then challenging and overturning that deception is itself, enriching, that it makes you more profound, or you're building up your strength by being the victim of this kind of deception. Well, this sure does apply to our relationships with women. Does it make you a better man to be deceived by a woman you've fallen in love with, or a woman where you just tried? Let's say you didn't even fall in love, but you were just trying. You were in their first few steps of trying to fall in love. Is it better to be deceived so that you just have the experience of struggling against and overcoming that deception? Or would you rather have a relationship that's based on real honesty from day one? So yeah, there are these kinds of unexamined assumptions built into, reading, built into the beauty of the book as such. And strangely, they don't even apply to listening to someone on radio. They don't even apply to listening to someone's voice on YouTube, I might say. We don't seem to think this way about our face-to-face relationships with other human beings, whether those are friendship or whether they're romantic.
You've spent a lifetime doing this sort of thing, this process of research and critique. Could an argument be made that it was actually through the reading of these sorts of texts, rather than good ones, that has sharpened your mind the most? If someone wanted to be like you, surely this sort of reading would have to be a big part of the process. Am I wrong?
You're wrong. There's no value in being lied to. There's no value in reading a deeply dishonest book just to discover and expose and overturn its dishonesty. There's no point in joining a religion just to end up debunking it years later. No. And so, look, I could pull on examples from all across the board. I've read books and I've spoken to professors who lied to me about ancient Greece and lied to me about ancient Rome. I have. About Buddhism, a religion I was a member of for some time, even if I was a very eccentric, very skeptical, very nihilistic member of the Buddhist faith. Still, Buddhism was a big part of my life. No, there is value in the truth and dealing with the truth, and there's no value in deception. Let's say you fall in love with someone who tells you that they're a medical doctor, and every day they come home with complaints about what's been going on at the hospital. And you're motivated and you spend the time to really listen to them and really care. And then you find out that actually they're a prostitute and they made up these elaborate stories about how they've never been to med school. They've never been to a hospital except when they were getting breast implants or whatever the story is. They don't know anything about working in a hospital. That all of this was fiction and not particularly well-informed fiction. And you say, well, what the hell? I was writing an anthropology thesis about corruption inside the medical system because you were telling me all this great stuff about how corrupt and inefficient the organization of the hospital is. Now I hear you're just making this up to deceive me while you were out sucking dicks at a nightclub or whatever. What is the value in being deceived? I understand why you're asking the question. I think there's really a misconception here that deserves to be addressed, very directly. When I did the research that went into my essay, 1920, the Other Russo-Japanese War, it's a long essay dealing with a war that takes place on the border between China and Russia on the Pacific Ocean. So this is the far, far east, further east than Siberia, if you like. There were pro-Russian texts, there were pro-communist texts that presented a 100% fictional account of what happened. And what am I going to tell you? That there's any value in reading communist propaganda that just, straight up lies to you about what happened and why? I think this does actually apply to ancient Rome in a very dynamic and peculiar way. I think some people are unaware that they're even making this judgment. There is a text by Cicero. Please excuse me horribly mispronouncing his name, but I am speaking English after all. The standard mispronunciation is Cicero. Cicero has this book called De Republica, On the Republic. Terrible. And it really is like communist propaganda of its own era. It really is. It's really propaganda about how wonderful the political system of the Roman Republic is. And it never even really describes to you how anything works. It's just bullshit. And I forced myself to read that whole thing. Now, almost nobody does. The copy we took out of the library, Melissa was with me at the library. I think nobody had taken it out of the library in 100 years. There was paper in the back tracking how nobody had read that. And generally speaking, I remember at that time I searched around the internet, and the e-texts for it had only been downloaded 14 times or whatever. There was so little about this. This is Cicero on the Republic. Telling me nobody has read this in the last 50 years? Well, I found out why. It's a terrible and it's a deeply dishonest text. Now, by contrast, we do have Cicero's personal letters to his friends. And in those letters, en passant, in those letters, we have descriptions given in passing and spontaneously of how the court system really works, how the laws really work, how legal, in some ways it is corrupt. And he is himself a corrupt lawyer, by the way. But how the courtroom works, how trials work, how elections work, how democracy works in that sense, that limited sense, the ways in which the republic is and isn't democratic, you actually get to see. Oh, and by the way, him complaining very candidly about what's going on in the Senate. Oh, that meeting at the Senate yesterday, we did this, wow. This is so this is the same author. It's the same man. It's Cicero. But one type of text is valuable and the other is worthless, because one is honest and one is dishonest. These are hard judgments to make, and it's sort of easier to visualize when I'm telling you the difference between communist propaganda and honest discussion of how the communist utopia went terribly wrong, right? But within one and the same period of time, and within the same life of the same man, the same author, you can actually have these same questions. I've lived my life in a way that's rigorously honest. I tell the truth to everybody all the time. I tell the truth to women I'm trying to sleep with. I tell the truth to women I'm trying to seduce. I don't lie to these hoes. And then I get to find out the extent to which they've lied to me in return. But look, I learn a lot by telling the truth. I learn a lot by dealing with reality, even when these are truths too terrible to tell. And these women learn nothing by deceiving me. Liars learn nothing by telling lies. And you also learn nothing by being deceived, by listening to lies, whether that's in the bedroom or in the library, to put it like that.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I will just say, I have the experience of lying to you, being one of these hoes who lies to you, and absolutely you do not learn anything from the experience. It's just a catastrophe and just leads to destruction and ruination. So don't lie. And you do not benefit from lying, and you do not benefit from somebody lying to you. And I do find that quite well said, that it seems that people have this, I guess, maybe like scientific approach to it, of trial and error. If you try to read this text as finding out what the meaning of life is, I tried this, I tried that. I'm going to read the Communist Manifesto, see if that means something to me, and see if that can, build my repertoire of just meaningful texts in my life, right? And then, you discard that. No, that didn't lead to any sort of theory, any sort of postulation, right? No, it really is just the case that you'd be better off reading primary source figures. I was better off reading Tombstone than I was reading a book which was propaganda from the Communist Party of China, saying how wonderful, life in China is. It's much better to read the actual facts and, figures, how many people died of starvation, because you actually understand the reality of what the outcomes are of this ideology in practice, as opposed to the fantasy of what a utopia could be like if you were to follow what's set down in the Communist Manifesto. Right?
It's actually a kind of fascinating and profound parallelism you've set up there, because it's a contrast between fantasy and reality. Like, okay, do you want to actually have real sex with real people? Which I've always encouraged you to do. Please let me say. let me say. But I've always warned you, like, real sex with real people means dealing with their real shortcomings. And, like, I'm sorry, there are all kinds of people who look beautiful, they have a great body, but, like, can I even endure sitting here and having a cup of coffee and a 1-hour conversation with them? Real people have tattoos. Melissa doesn't like tattoos. Real people have a smoking habit. You know what I mean? Real people have all these, real people have kind of psychological injuries from their last relationship that they bring to bear, and they're haunted by ghosts and demons. Real people you want to have sex with sit down and tell you that they believe 9/11 was an inside job. They're people you're attracted to, and they tell you something so ignorant, so redneck ignorant about politics that you think, oh my God, can I actually have sex with people? That's the world of real sex, as opposed to the world of fantasy, right? So it is funny. Like, I wasn't thinking about setting it up this way, but like, your problem was precisely that you were addicted to a fantasy world. You even lost track of what's real and what's fake, in the passage of time, which I knew nothing about. And I'm out here, I'm like, look, I'm dealing with real problems, real politics, real history, real philosophy, but also real sex and real people and their real shortcomings. And yeah, what you're addicted to is much more like someone who insists that China is a democracy Because it says in the Constitution it's democracy, and you can read Mao Zedong and his definition of like all these places, North Korea. There are all these countries. Well, even now, Vladimir Putin claims he's living in a democracy. Claims well, yeah, okay. You can read these kind of dogmatic statements, that kind of set out the fantasy for you. That again, it's all about belief, believe.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what you were into was kind of about believing, as opposed to being, and as opposed to doing. I'm all about being, not believing. I'm not into fantasy at all. I'm not, and like I said, I tell the truth to all these hoes. I tell the truth to all these women. And often enough, the truth is, I love you. It is. I mean it. I mean, I really got love for these. I really do appreciate the women in my life. And I said this. Do you remember me saying this way back in season 1? So this is closer to 10 years ago. I remember saying, you can spend time with a woman who's worked as a waitress and nothing but a waitress. She didn't study ancient Latin. She didn't study Buddhism, but she really has some meaningful life experience to share with you. She has some insight into the human condition, from her years of waitressing. That exists and that's real. And, you can love that woman and appreciate what's positive about her, on that level, who she is emotionally, ethically, but also intellectually. Like, really, people can have some. And among men, I've known guys who were like plumbers, farmers, like whatever, guys from all kinds of backgrounds. They can have something of real intellectual substance, right? But yeah, for me, all that engagement, like step 0 is this commitment to doing something real, being something real, and not living in a world of beliefs and fantasies and maybe. So it's funny though, but that actually does really kind of apply to this same question in this strange way. The Communist Manifesto, it's not just a bad text. The Communist Manifesto tells you what to believe.
Yes.
It tells you what Karl Marx wants you to believe, right? And look, we can say this again about Cicero. De Republica tells you what to believe. Even some of Cicero's religious texts are like that. It's telling you what Cicero wants you to believe. And that's very different from the reality that you get even out of Cicero's personal letters.
Yes,
Right.
Ultimately, there is nothing to be believed in. This is just the reality of his day-to-day life, and he talks about it in his letters in a more, real way. This is his real life.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, the famous denunciation of Catiline. So the Catiline conspiracy was in English, Catalina in Latin. Cicero stands up in the Senate, and what he does is pure theater, denouncing, Catalina, whatever you want to call this guy. Mm-hmm. And in his personal letters, you see, he's like, oh yeah, I'm hoping to work with Catiline in the upcoming elections. Like, he's a good guy. And, I volunteered to be his lawyer in his case and support his side in this argument. The political reality behind the theater. No, even that. That's actually quite early in the letters. I've heard it's on page 1. It's in the first. It's right up. It's really jumps at you. Whoa! This is what his actual relationship with Catiline was. Right? Yeah. And no, another one is his denunciation of Mark Antony. So Mark Antony's another rival political leader. He denounces Mark Antony as literally having been a prostitute, a male prostitute. So you're left to wonder about what's real and what's theatrical. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this is a choice you can make. You can live in a world of fantasy, or you can live in a world of reality, which includes dealing with truths that are too terrible to tell. So let's just throw in a couple of really.
It's not that you've reached that conclusion by reading these texts.
You're right.
By reading these texts, believing in them, and then ultimately becoming disillusioned. Yeah. And
it's so funny because I didn't think of that, and then the moment you started talking, I realized where you were going, and that's why I said, "Yeah, you're right, Colin. Yeah, you're right, Colin. Yep."
Yeah, you had that ability to see through the artifice, and a lot of people do not. So it's just so much irresponsibility on the part of.
I did not become inoculated against falling off a bicycle by falling off a bike.
Yes.
Okay, I have broken bones from falling off a bicycle. Doesn't mean the next time I get in a bicycle I'm stronger or wiser. You know what I mean? I fell off a bike, it hit my skull, another accident, broke bones in my wrist. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to hold a pencil or pen again and have handwriting again. No, that's it. It's just permanent damage. I didn't learn anything by being deceived, whether it's by Melissa or by my own parents. Right. I was raised in a household with a lot of lies, a lot of abuse, No, I don't benefit. I don't get stronger. I don't get shrewder. And then, I feel like we just have to apply that to these texts in the same way. Karl Marx is lying to you. I'm sorry, so we're just picking on Marx here. We could throw in some other examples, but whatever. Obviously American politicians. They're all sorry. I'm actually blanking on a better example. But you can grow up with a bunch of lies you get a little bit too comfortable with, whether those are kind of communist lies or lies within the democratic Overton window. So I think, just to give out some challenging examples, lies about equality, and then you got to deal with the reality of inequality. At some point you stop believing, I mean every kind of equality here, guys. Gender equality, economic equality, whatever, the democratic cult of equality, and you figure out how the real world really works. Or it's this kind of subtle distinction when Cicero is preaching to you and when Cicero is demonstrating to you in his private letters how the world really works, whatever it is. But no, you do not learn from being deceived, even though it's easy to sort of glamorize the process of disillusionment that came afterward.
Mm-hmm. Both hands crusty, chillin' with my man Rusty, low down. Blew off the burner, kinda dusty. The world can't touch, ghost purple tape. Ray co-host, Manjiho Expo, intellect direct pro. Son's trifling fuck, wildflower on the cycling. Picked up the broom, thought I was Michaelin. West Brighton pool, now I'm into iron duels. Turn uns, the earth's whoopee. She out of law school. Inhale, break piece of hell. A life propel, parallel. Door to cell nut, you flash a burn cell. Snap at the Candyland kids, the old rumor is blacks become immune to shit we never did, like eating dead birds. Trust the pharmacy over herbs, men marrying men ill. They got the herbs, pulse off, scissor hand, wig vanished in the winter. Living on plan, you got them right. I fuck fans, king me, checkmate. Price like the Michael Chip founder. Neck to neck stock with Bill Gates now. When we hug these mics, we get busy. Come and have a good time with G.O.D.
Okay, question 5. I'm curious, how do you discover your books? How do you actually find the titles and decide whether a book is worth your time and effort? You've touched on this topic briefly in some live streams, but I don't recall a specific video about it.
Yeah, and there never will be a specific video. This ain't nothing but blood, sweat, and tears and sorrow. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of suffering. You can spend more time trying to find the right book than you spend reading the right book once you've found it. It's just misery, and it's not a skill that can be transmitted or shared. Melissa has seen me do this. Melissa has stood next to me in a library where I go up to a shelf and I take every single book off the shelf. Mm-hmm. So in a given department, on a given topic, whatever you want to say, yes. And I sit down and I go through every single one of those books. Obviously on the internet, you're doing the same thing without having the physical copy in front of you sometimes, where you're sifting through a huge range of sources and you are trying to make that determination which few out of the many are worth reading. And then again, the contrast is like the research I already mentioned about 1920 in this remote part of Siberia. So that I just read absolutely everything I could get. That's obscure enough. You read every single book you could find that even mentions it. So that's the opposite problem. And then you find out which ones are garbage the hard way. Mm. And look, there are some cases in which you just can't win. I'll give you an example that's relevant to politics right now. Milton Friedman. You can't win. Absolutely anything you're going to read about Milton Friedman and economics, Milton Friedman and free trade, Milton Friedman and tariffs, it's all going to be lies. It's all going to be politically motivated deception. There is no good book on this topic. The books that are now reflecting on and analyzing what went wrong in Afghanistan, in English at least. Let me tell you something, bro. There's no way to win. There is no good book on the topic, or there isn't one yet. Melissa was with me. I'm sorry. To me, this is a funny example. I hope this isn't a sad example for me. I got a book on Seneca, so the life and politics of Seneca in English. So this wasn't a translation of one text; it was an analysis of and reflection on the guy's whole career and all of the extant texts. It's a major work. There's many, and I kept saying to Melissa, I'm learning a lot from this book. It's valuable. I'm glad I bought it. I'm glad I'm reading it. But the quality of English is just so poor. It's just too bad they didn't get a better translator, because I assumed the original language was Spanish. And when I got to the very end of the book, I looked up, I Googled the author to learn a little bit more about her. It was a female. Nope. English was her first language. English is the first edition, and it was translated into Spanish. I misinterpreted it. I'm guessing the particular copies I saw for sale, like the Spanish translation was published before the English paperback or something like that. You know what I mean? I thought the Spanish came out first. Something misled me onto this. But no. This is just an incredibly stupid person who's an incredibly bad writer. And then, of course, you start to question other things about the book.
Yeah.
So this is Seneca. Even these most kind of mainstream central sources, Seneca, Cicero, and obviously we've already repeatedly talked about, Plato and Socrates. You can be dealing with sources that are deeply dishonest, that are nothing but lies. And look, this is a very hard thing to learn about human nature. This leads back to Melissa's so-called infidelity. In fact, she did not cheat on me. She broke the rules, but she didn't actually meet anyone in person. It was just fantasy, communication online. I always used to say, behind all authority is mere authorship.
Right.
You're choosing to trust an author. A relationship with a book is an indirect relationship with a human being. I mean, it is based on trust. And yeah, this is what I was going to say, the parallelism to your attempted infidelity.
Yeah.
Something I've had to learn as an old man with gray hairs in my beard is that people will lie when they have nothing to gain. That was it. Like, for all those years, I was like, why would Melissa lie to me? Why would Melissa see me? It's an open relationship anyway. If she wants to have sex with another man, she can, and I'll encourage her and support her. Then it come up. There have been scenarios like, oh, yeah, sure, man. I'll go and meet you guys. We'll all go to the Waffle House together so you feel safe. Or whatever. We'll go to the hotel room together. All three of us can be the same. I don't give a fuck. It's great. I was positive and supportive about this being an open relationship where she'd have sex with her partners. So why would she cheat on me? Or why would she attempt to cheat on me? Why would she lie to me? Why would she deceive me? But the answer is that for Melissa, the lies were not a means to the end, right? The lies were an end in themselves. Like the deception is an end in itself, the fantasy is an end in itself. So that's the part that's most alien to me. Right. Like, even when we're talking about these books, okay, communism, you get it. Like, okay, this person is lying because somehow their ego is attached to the greatness of the communist movement. Yeah, okay, so you can construe that. But what you have to get used to is people are lying when they write these books and write history and write about politics and write about for no reason at all. The lie becomes an end in itself. Whether that's because of the enjoyment of fantasy or the ego trip. And again, for you, it was all of these things and more.
Yes, that's absolutely true. No, I think that I'm really glad that you got back to that because, I wanted to know where you were headed with that. But absolutely. It is an end in itself, or that was how that was how I was handling things at the time.
You can enjoy lying without even feeling that you're hurting or deceiving the other person, because you just enjoy being a liar. You enjoy fantasy just because you're a fantasist, so on and so forth. So, that is a trait endemic to the human species.
Yes, but it's not something that it's alien to you. And
yes,
that's sort of what I find so about that question here, that if somebody wants to, be like you, wouldn't that be a process of reading these texts and becoming disillusioned? They can't be like you. Other people do not have this, or if they are able to develop this kind of mode of reasoning, it's there's an inequality there that some people have it and some people don't. Some people can, see through things in a text, and some people can be taught to really dissect and see the lies that are on the page that are just written there, but some people can't. And if you try to tell them, hey, this book that you're reading is full of lies, and here, let me show you, like, actually I can disprove this by showing you this research study, even if they agree with you at that moment, they'll go behind your back and say, God, this piece of shit is telling me that this book that I've based my whole fucking life around is a lie.
Yeah.
Fuck him. Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Or if you have a different attitude, like a more religious attitude, I hope that he sees the light. I hope that he finds faith, and I hope that it just whatever method they use to cope with being confronted with the lies that are right there on the page, whether it's a religious text or something about psychiatry, something about just how somebody bases their identity, they will be incapable of just saying, you know what, you're right.
Yeah.
And then reevaluating how they are living their lives.
You're conflating two problems here. They're closely related, but they're different. How people relate to the text and how people relate to me as someone challenging the text. So we can address both. Briefly, dear listener, stay tuned. I think the problem with how people read is that they don't want to understand the text. They don't want to learn something. They don't want to change their lives. They want to be happy. And then they look at the text as a means to that happiness. And that's always wrong. I hate to tell you this, people. It's always bad and evil and wrong when you start off looking for happiness. I would compare this to, in your own sort of attempted infidelity. During that period of time, of several years, you had no interest in going to the gym. You had no interest in getting in shape. This was a source of tension in the relationship. I was going to the gym, whatever. It's not the most profound tension. A lot of couples go through this. But you managed to find the one guy on the internet who would endlessly flatter you and tell you didn't need to go to the gym, you didn't need to get in shape, and he would even tell you that, like, I'm insane because I'm trying to motivate you to go to the gym and get in shape. You know what I mean? Like, you managed to find someone who kind of reinforced this fantasy, that, like, I just didn't appreciate you, whereas this other guy who has a crush on you on the internet, he does, and whatever. Like, you're already so beautiful. You don't need to exercise at the gym, So what do you want? Do you want to be happy? See what I'm saying? And you see how just delusion and lies and fantasy, that's what people are looking for in a text, and what you were looking for and found in these, frankly, text-based relationships, because that's all it was. Texting this kind of shit back and forth. So look, people manage to read the Bible and really not see the evidence that is right in front of their lives.
Yeah.
Why? They don't want to understand the Bible. Like, they don't want to understand what happened or why this is written. They don't want to understand the intent of the author. They want to be happy. Now, it's different for different people. Some people want to be happy because they want to feel like a holy man. They want to feel like the Rastafarian language. They want to be Rasta. They want to be righteous. They want to feel the sense of being righteous and holy, and that makes them happy. I knew a guy, didn't know him well, but I will just say vaguely, I knew a guy. And, he had sat there with a fundamentalist Christian preacher and gone through the text and said, look, is there anything in the text against a man going out and sleeping with a prostitute and having a child with a prostitute? And the answer was no. The Bible is pro-prostitution and pro-whore. So this is the most closely guarded secret in the Protestant religion, guys. It's the most closely guarded secret. Anyway, he found a religious justification. His wife didn't want to get pregnant and have a baby. And guess what, guys? It's in the Old Testament a lot. He was allowed to go out and sleep, obviously, within Islam, the whole phenomenon of sex slavery and second wives and third wives. Like, the point is, in some cases, the type of happiness is quite crude and palpable. It's sexual happiness, or what have you. It could be something dark and evil, like revenge. But where you are just looking at the text or how it can make you happy, often enough, this sense of holiness, self-righteousness, right? Communists connect to Karl Marx that way, connect to this text that way. They are not interested in really even seeing the evidence of what's on the page in front of them. So obviously, I don't even need to say this about Buddhism. I don't even say this about, say, First Nations, the Cree, the Ojibwe indigenous people, texts related to them and their history. I don't need to say this about the American Constitution. People just want to believe. People are looking at the Constitution. They don't want to understand it. They just want to feel happy, and they want to feel like, I was lucky to be born in this country. I was lucky to be born in this country where the Constitution was written by geniuses who had just thought of everything in advance. This is the most ridiculous. How can you read this? I'm sorry. Melissa and I recently read the Magna Carta together. The level of delusion, the level of self-deception of British people reading the Magna Carta and convincing themselves, I'm lucky to be born in this country where this document was written by the mentally disabled. I mean, come on. If this is if you aren't ashamed of the Magna Carta, what kind of intellectual are you? You should be, if you're American, you should be ashamed of your Constitution too. It's terrible. These are, these are the darkest, bleakest moments in the history of political science. These are the low points in the history of political philosophy. This is the worst. It's not the best. And look, what am I going to say? If you're Italian, you should be proud of Machiavelli. I mean, it's whatever. Talk about the dismal science, What's more depressing, politics or economics? But anyway, my point is this. People read the text and just want to be happy. And any interpretation or misinterpretation that serves their personal happiness is going to be forced to fit. If they have a choice between reality and fantasy, and the fantasy helps to build up their ego, helps to reinforce their sense of themselves being a wonderful person, they're going to choose the fiction every time.
Yes.
Now, this actually I really wasn't planning to structure this as an essay on your own history of,
I know,
right.
This was not planned in any sense at all. That's why to be self-critical, I have been struggling with my responses, but right. I think you are saying something very important that I have not verbalized, or you have not verbalized before this conversation. So yes, but no, absolutely, I wanted to be okay. Want is I should not use this. I should not use the term want. Okay, so I saw how you were able to read a text and just say, hey, there are so many issues with this. Let me tell you about the issues with this, and let me explain why this is wrong, why this person is wrong. I'd seen YouTube videos that you'd made in which you showed, very clearly the flawed belief system in somebody else's life. And I saw, an example, of somebody who was not living with, based on fantasy. This was something that, I even saw it, somebody who was living a, life based on doing and based on reality. But I was escaping to a fantasy world again and again and again. And it was, yes, as you said, a lie for the sake of lying, and also for the sake of one's ego. You'd rather, not you, me, a very flawed person, chose fantasy and lies as opposed to the reality. But I was living with somebody that, yes, it's just wow, what a fraud. I'm living with somebody, even recording videos talking about nihilism. But in this even real relation, personal life, I couldn't live with nihilism, even in this broad sense here, with how I lived my life. So yeah, no, ultimately just complete failure to actually accept that, belief is going to destroy you. Lies are going to destroy you. Lies are going to destroy other people, and you're hurting others by doing this. And, that was what you were saying again and again. Hey, the vegan movement, there are so many people who are lying, and not only that animals are, being slaughtered on this enormous scale, but like people's lives are being ruined in the vegan movement. That was what I was hearing again and again, because of these lies and because of the fantasy of being a gorgeous, bikini model who eats,
Right.
just as much as they want, and still looks great. Like that, that is the fantasy that was
Right.
being sold. And you were talking about how much of a problem that is in people's
Right.
lives, right?
Well,
So yeah,
and look, I do think there's a parallel there. I mean, there's a parallel between the life of the mind and the life of the body here, even if imperfect. I remember talking to you about pushing respect. And it's like, look, if you want to have an opinion about Aristotle that people are going to respect, you got to do the work, you got to get the results, and you got to push respect. It's all on you. You know what I mean? If everyone's laughing at you and saying you're just a bimbo who sleeps with Zell from Ashdod or whatever. Yeah. And no offense, but even in stand-up comedy, that's how people treated you. That was so bizarre. We were in situations stand-up comedy where everyone's treating me like I'm the talent, I'm the talented comedy writer and you're just some bimbo hanging on my arm. Yeah. And the women trying to sleep with me right in front of your face, they also are treating you like that. Nobody seems to care. Nobody regards you as talented, whether as an actress or comedian or whatever. It's like, nope, it's all attention to me. But you live with that for years, where it's like, well, you want to make your opinion about communism count. You want to make your opinion about Aristotle or whatever count. Right. And I was saying, look, if you want this, if you want to have kind of the benefits, the fruits of your labor of living the life of the mind, you got to get out there and live it. It's about doing, it's about being, it's about action, it's about outcomes. It's not about belief and it's not about flattery and it's not susceptible to these things. Likewise, with the life of the body, both in relation to the gym, in relation to the bedroom, like in relation to sex and in relation to being in shape. Mm-hmm. I can remember one day, again, this is not a situation in which she was prevented from pursuing other men or sleeping with other men. It was an open relationship. Within the rules, she was encouraged, But it's like, look, if you want to do this, you have to put in the work and you have to get the results. And that's it. I mean, it's just and it's work. It's work, and the work in both cases, the work involves some degree of kind of humiliation. Frankly, it's just grimy. It's just hard. It's emotionally draining. I remember one day we were on an app. We were on an app for open-minded people like ourselves, meeting other open-minded people like ourselves. Other people live outside the rules of Catholic marriage, shall we say? And there was this incredibly beautiful woman with these incredibly flattering photographs of herself. And she was obviously wealthy, or at least these photographs succeeded in making her look wealthy. And I think she had 2 kids. And it's showing her, I'm sorry, these are these sexy pictures of herself. And in one picture, she's got a wine glass, and another, she's smoking marijuana. And she's in amazing physical shape. And I was like, and I forget, but she's got a job. She says what her job is. And I said to Melissa, when you look at these pictures, think about how much work this woman is putting in to look this way and be in this kind of shape when you have 2 kids and a job. And think about the risk she's taking and the ridicule she's subject to. She's got 2 kids. She's got pictures of her body on this sex app, this what do you want to say, this website that lets you meet other people and have sex. She's openly saying what she wants. She's taking that risk. She's going on the record publicly and say, yeah, she's a mother with 2 kids, and again, obviously puts in a lot of work in terms of diet and exercise to look this good. And she's still out here looking, And again, sorry, it's just like the suffering. And it's like, and what do you think she gets in return? The other men that are on this app. She's getting nothing but offers of one-night stands from grody dudes with tattoos and a decade-long drug habit. She's got maybe once in a long while she finds someone worth sleeping with, but she's got to sift through the worst of the worst. She's got to sift through all kinds of men who are going to lie to her and manipulate her and misuse her. It's terrible. I'm just sympathize. Even someone this beautiful, even someone with all these privileges and advantages in life, look at what she has to go through to try to get a 3-way or a 4-way going. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that challenge, and to not deceive yourself about it and not deceive others about it, and to live in the world as it is, not the world as it should be. Oh, yeah. And not to sign up for having someone tell you that you're already beautiful enough and you're already in good enough shape, you already look great naked or whatever. When you don't, when it's been coronavirus. I mean, let's say for me too. By the way, coronavirus ruined my health really, like, directly, but it also indirectly shut down the gym and made everything else more difficult too. But like, no, it's a huge struggle for me. It's a struggle for Melissa too, and for a lot of people. But no, that's not what you need. You don't need to hear. You don't need to hear you're already in shape when you're not, and you don't need someone telling you you're already brilliant when you're not. Like, in terms of the life of the mind in parallel, you don't need to believe, and you don't need this kind of flattery. You need to deal with what's really real.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Without saying, oh, how tragic, how horrible, how terrible. Yes, I mean that I think has already been stated. Yes, tragic, terrible, horrible, just every negative adjective that I can put on this. Yes, of course, I would assign just regret, anguish, horror, yes, everything bad about it. But I will just say the reality is I had an opportunity during coronavirus to buckle down, prove myself intellectually, but also prove myself as somebody who can, as a 27-year-old woman, I can say what I want sexually to somebody and actually do it. Like,
Right.
Hey, if I actually want to have sex with a person, I can say that to them. And if they reject me, fine. Like that. But if it's not about that, that's, that I can look back and see, holy shit, what, possessed me, but obviously it was me. There's no demon that possessed me. It's just that was who I was. Just accepting that was who I was. And you were telling me all the time, hey, if you want to be respected, you have to push respect. You have to put in the hard work. If you want your opinion about Tombstone to matter, you have to actually, make something out of what you've read that other people can, pay attention to, respect, and learn something from. And, if you don't want to just be seen as the bimbo who sleeps with Liza Mazard, then you need to do something other than be just the bimbo who sleeps with Liza Mazard. Like, yeah, well, okay, you were telling me that again and again. And
ironically, I think all these guys you communicate with on the internet regarded you entirely as the bimbo who sleeps with Liza Mazard. It is a bitter irony, but that vacillates, because I've seen the correspondence, I've seen the messages, it's really there.
Oh yeah, look, and yeah,
it's okay.
That's a whole no, it's okay. It's a whole other thing where you talk about the textual reality. Well, I have the text. I have now finally gone back and read all the messages, and it's like, wow, okay, look, it was there the whole time. It was staring me in the face, but I just wanted to believe, and like, yeah, I mean, the first question here was talking about in an age of social media addiction and video game addiction. How do you make politics fun? Okay, well, what if social media addiction, what if me having, participating in lies and betrayal of this, sexual nature was not fun? What if this was just, something that I was using as, a means to not accept reality? Instead of, accepting, hey, at 27 years old, you're a failure, you're a loser, you're nobody, you're just this woman who has sex with Liza Mazard, and if you want anybody to think of you as anything other than that, you need to actually do something that demonstrates that. But instead, I chose to talk to people who, whether they said it to me directly or they allowed me to have this delusion that, okay, actually, no, I'm smart enough already. I'm beautiful enough already. I don't need to do anything to make anybody respect me. I don't need to do...
Yes. You do not need to read a book and then do a book review. For example, it's ridiculous, and it really does come down to this kind of thing. Go on, yeah.
Yeah, and also, if you want to be sexy, it makes sense. You have to push yourself and exercise. You have to do many reps of different, exercises to have a physique that is good looking when you're naked. Okay, yeah, that's a very basic thing. I am guilty of like just wanting to say, well, why do I have to do that? When it's fucked up, and I hate myself. I hated myself then. I just say I in 2020 I had the opportunity. I had one path that you were, talking about with me all the time. You know, how can I be somebody that, you know, has something that I can take pride in, have a little bit of dignity in, a little bit of, you know, self-respect, or, you know, I took this other path that you had no idea that I was doing, you would not have approved of, and you didn't approve of, and it led to disastrous consequences. And I chose that path. I chose this path of destruction and, you know, lies and self-deception and deception of you. Deception of, you know.
So look, the irony is here. She just said that she hates herself, and you may have noticed I don't hate her. I mean, I have a very detached, open-minded perspective on these things. Like when I ask that question, who do you want to be 5 years from now? There's more than one answer. You know, it's not that I have just one answer, you know, for Melissa or for you or for anyone else. But the tragedy of what Melissa did is you chose something fake over something real. Yeah. You chose fantasy over reality again and again and again. And again, like, you are with an incredibly rare, like, dissident intellectual nonconformist who would have been fine with you actually having sex with other men. And you didn't do that. Instead, you got into this kind of downward spiral of delusion and self-justification. And sorry, but to bring this back to the life of the mind in the books, some people in the audience know this example, but most don't. We devised this project, the two of us together, that Melissa would research and make a series of YouTube videos talking about the politics of Central Asia. So these are countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. And we chose that precisely because it was political history I was not an expert in already. Yeah. So, and I was like, okay, Melissa, you're going to take on this project, and it's totally your initiative, and you're, you know, it's all up to you. I'm not going to guide it. And it was for exactly the reason she was just talking about, that she didn't just want to be the woman sleeping with me. She wanted to, you know, try to build herself up intellectually on some other basis and challenge me and take on new areas of research and new directions. And she literally didn't do it.
Well, yeah,
you know,
that's
the time that really was set aside, I mean, it's more than 6 months, more like a full year. You know, something like a full year that was spent instead obsessing over these other guys and messaging them and dealing with these, you know, masturbatory fantasies, literally and figuratively. That's where that time went, over a year. It's not the only project of its kind, but that was a purely intellectual project for your development. And it did, in this way, relate to these questions of ego and identity that we've both been talking about. And it comes back to, who do you want to be 5 years from now? Yeah. You know, 5 years from now, you can be fluent in the ancient Latin language. You can have reading comprehension of Latin. You're not going to speak Latin fluently. You're not going to write it fluently. You can have reading comprehension of ancient Latin. It takes 5 years. Ready, set, go. You know, by the way, I would not say this about Chinese. In 5 years, you can be a beginner in Chinese. You know, Chinese is such a hard language. What are you going to do in Chinese? You know, you can develop a research interest in and expertise in Central Asia, and then we can buy an airplane ticket and go to Central Asia. You know, we can go see these places you've been reading about. You know what I mean? That can be a kind of wonderful thing. And the point was, that would be different from going to Athens, different from going to Madrid or Rome, and places that interest me, right? And history I've studied. It's different from going to Sri Lanka or Myanmar. We've been to Thailand, and I spoke Thai there, and, you know, I already speak Lao, and I studied Cambodian for some period of time. You know, if we go there, I'm already an expert. If we go to Central Asia, we go to Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan, it is Melissa would have her own expertise, would be kind of standing on her own feet, would be developing this. That would be a scenario in which she is teaching me. And you blew it.
Yeah.
No.
And now it's 5 years later.
Right. That's right. That's right. Who do you want to be 5 years now? And again, there's not some kind of simple sense. Like, you weren't forbidden to have sex with other men or other women. So you can have sex. You just can't let it ruin your whole life. And instead, you didn't have sex, and it did ruin your whole life, including and especially, you know, things like the Central Asian Project. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I will say that this concept of, hey, you know, Melissa could have had sex with people, Azel could have had sex with people, and we could both have been honest about our involvement with other people, and we could have had sex with people together, could have had meaningful relationships with other people together based on honesty, trust, respect, and so on. Yes, and now 5 years later, this is the result. I lied for 4 years, and had this, public meltdown about having lied for 4 years, and now 1 year later, here we are.
I'm saying this partly in parallel and partly to come back to these questions with the life of the mind. Many people listening to this, at some point in your life, you'll be in the situation of having a friend who tells you that when they first started using cocaine, they had no idea what they were getting involved in. They had no idea what the consequences were. And you have to say to that friend, no, dude. I grew up in the same block as you. We went to the same school. We probably even had the same teacher. I saw the same program. No, dude. You knew what the consequences would be of getting mixed up in cocaine. You knew. Okay? And that conflict can go on for 5 months or 5 years or 50 years. It can go on forever. Or maybe you never talk to each other again. It becomes very important to the ego that he says, hey, I didn't know. I didn't know what the consequences were. Because if you did know, now what? Now you have to face up to the extent to which you're evil. We're dealing with Gnostic evil. Gnostic evil, knowing. You are knowingly doing evil. You're doing evil with full knowledge of the consequences and knowledge that it is evil, what you do, right? Now, obviously, situation many of you in the audience will have been in. You have a friend who got mixed up with Xanax or Percocets or, one of these mood-altering ADHD drugs, Adderall, one of these antidepressants, and then after some years, they say, hey, I had no idea what I was getting mixed up in. Prozac, whatever, Oh, I had no idea. And you have to say, look, bro, this was what it said on the label. This is literally the FDA label. So you didn't read this. Your doctor didn't read this. I read it. I told you. You knew. You knew what the consequences were. You made excuses, whatever. Oh, no, you knew. So now you're dealing with... Now, look, the thing is, guys, these are dramatic examples, right? And Melissa has to live for the rest of her life with this knowledge, both in terms of sins of omission and sins of commission. Yes. Right? So what you did, you knew. Yeah. And if positions were reversed, you know how devastating it would be for you. Melissa is devastated by much, much smaller things. We've talked about that for many hours. Like, look, you remember this situation where this beautiful woman was flirting with me and I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't say anything inappropriate. But just the fact that she wanted me and didn't want you, you're devastated. Whatever, We have all these funny stories of how things. And I'm very careful. I'm very sensitive for that reason. I'm aware how much it's like. Okay, so if you knew how devastating this would be for me, how devastating it would be for everyone in my audience. Frankly, it is true. There are people in my audience who are devastated. But it's bizarre, but it's true. Yeah. There's a very different sort of reckoning there but this also applies to sins of omission. Okay, I trusted you to make these videos talking about Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and politics in Central Asia. And in deciding not to do that, in deciding to break your promise and let me down, and who you become and what you learn and what, look, you can lie to the whole world and say you're learning Chinese when you're not learning Chinese. You lie to me. You can lie to her. What are you actually learning? What are you doing? What is the career you're pursuing? This is also part of it. What's the further education? What's the college program you're enrolled? What do you do? Oh, you're actually not doing any of that. So there's omission. There's stuff you promised to do you didn't do. And, it's not a simple cause and effect, but yeah, it really is linked to the hundreds of hours you put into attempting to cheat on me in this way, in this bizarre fantasy life you developed in this other ego trip. And look, I just say to the audience again, I learned nothing from that. Right. There is no silver lining to that cloud. Right. And what we're left with moving forward is in this sense confronting Gnostic evil. Now, this is a convenient segue to come back to my main point here with the life of the mind, dear listeners. So we said before, I was criticizing the problem of people reading a text, but they're not actually interested in the text. They're reading a text, but they're not interested in the intent of the author or the politics or philosophy or social context in which the book was written. Talked about people reading a text, but what they want is happiness. Then we got into this digression about dishonesty and delusion and fantasy and happiness. And flattery as a shortcut to happiness, as opposed to dealing with real things, as opposed to actual being, becoming, doing. But there's another problem that intersects with the dishonesty people are burdened with in reading a text. They're reading a text and really they just want to be happy. And they lie to themselves and in many ways don't see the evidence on the page for them. Okay. And then they have some kind of direct encounter with me. And I'm challenging them and I'm trying to change their mind and how they deal with that or how they react to that. I met one of my fellow vegans because he was vegan. And he turned out to be a supporter of Vladimir Putin. So he's one of these guys who believes elaborate conspiracy theories that justify politically what Vladimir Putin has been doing and that blame the United States of America for everything bad in the world. This kind of political perspective. So that's the first time I've met someone like that face to face. It might be the only time. So I was interested to listen to him, even though I regarded him as some kind of mixture of stupid and evil and insane. But the next topic of conversation, interestingly, is that he believes in conspiracy theories about soap. That he refuses to wash his hands with soap. He does not believe in disinfectant, generally, or purifying things with alcohol. So I challenge him right away. First, by leaping to an example that, is very visceral, something he has a sense of, the experience, the tactile experience, touch and feel and smell. Said, you're an organic gardener, right? You work with your hands in the fields, farming and digging and planting and pulling. Do you then go into your house afterwards and have sex with your wife without cleaning your hands first with soap and water? Are you telling me it's safe to go from digging in the garden to putting your hands inside your wife's vagina without first washing them with soap and water? Are you telling me you can't see the difference, even in that case, of what you see in the sink, in the kitchen sink going down when you wash your hands with and without soap, or as opposed to just using water? And he was flummoxed. He could not deal with it. He could not answer. And it didn't stop there. I pressed on to say, okay, so what about a hospital? Are you telling me that at the hospital, doctors don't need to wash their hands with soap and water? Are you telling me that there is no point, there is no benefit to cleaning the instruments used in surgery, the knife, the scalpel, with disinfectant, whether it be alcohol, soap and water, or both? You first clean them with soap and then... Is that what you're telling me? Are you telling me if we set up two hospitals side by side, one of which uses soap and one of which believes your theory, and what do you think the outcomes are going to be at these two hospitals in terms of human health? And then I come back to the question of his wife. What about when it's your wife going in for surgery? Do you say to the doctor, no, it's fine, you don't have to wash your hands? Do you say to the doctor, no, it's fine, you don't have to clean the scalpel? You don't have to do that because you don't believe in it? Instead, you believe in this conspiracy theory. This is the position I've been in for more than 10 years now. Where, again, this is very different from encountering a text. This is very different from the kind of self-deception people have, where they read the Bible and all they want to believe is that Moses was a great man. And they just don't see that it's telling them Moses massacred 3,000 of his own people because they didn't believe in his insane cult. What it's describing Moses being an insane cult leader who massacres his own people brutally. That it's describing Moses as a magician who has a magic fire and a magic brazen serpent, all kinds of things that make you be regarded as a Satanist in our time. And it says that Moses has horns. In case you missed that, he has horns on his forehead, and that's depicted in a lot of medieval art. It's a man with horns on his head and this magic brazen serpent that will heal you, and if you don't get in line, if you're a member of his tribe, and he massacres anyone who disagrees with him and challenges his authority. That's true. For some reason, you allegedly read that cover and you just didn't see the evidence in front of your face. That's one kind of self-deception. But what I've dealt with for more than 10 years on this pattern of this guy who didn't believe in soap is, I can present my thesis on Aristotle, and people either regard me as a genius or they regard me as retarded. And there's just nothing in between, where they either have to totally dismiss what I'm saying and not accept it, or they kind of recognize it, this fanatical extent. It's very strange. So I just say the type of disjuncture we're dealing with, like, okay, do you want to choose reality or fantasy? There's a sense in which reading alone that's going on all the time, and it's kind of subtle and constant. There's this, and people are making the choice again and again and again. They kind of believe in the Bible rather than reading it. They're not really seeing the evidence from others. They're not analyzing it. They're not learning from it, right? But when they're confronted by someone like myself, and maybe there is nobody else like myself, but speaking for myself, this is a really radical, uncomfortable challenge. So, all of a sudden now you have to choose. Are you going to say I'm insane, or are you going to recognize that you are? And, so again, this comes back to Gnostic evil. Are you now going to knowingly choose to live your life? Are you going to continue to support this theory about soap and about disinfectant that would result in the deaths of thousands of people if you convinced other people to believe in it? Are you going to believe in something evil knowing that it's evil after this has been explained to you? Or are you going to accept that your own belief 1 week ago was evil, but now you're a different man? And Melissa, of all people, has been faced with this kind of crossroads again and again and again. And, most of us, we don't have political power. We don't make choices that influence or impact thousands of other people or the fate of nations, right? What we get to choose is who we want to be 5 years from now.
That's word, I'm not the herb. Understand what I'm saying? Hit mics like Ted Koppel, rifle expert, let off the Eiffel. Burn a flag in your grass, spiteful. Ringleader, set it off. Rap Derek Jeter, culprit. Prince of the game, wish you could see us. We lay low, glitter wax, full bangles. Priceless ropes, lay around the guard. Get tangled, woolly hair, eyes fiery red. Feet made of brass, 12 men following me. It be the guard staff move. Every script's like Miramax. Smash the big boy, totaled it. Wilshire, Fairfax, sunbeaming, wifey on the beach, sipping Zima, Wubinos to Latinos. We lust Selena overnight. God schedules, FedEx, pretty solo at Velvet Nights, DNA scroll genetics too high to handle one thought from scrambling. The mandolin, 100 gang, Will Chamberlain, smack him, say when he rolling up, face wrinkled up, hands is on his nuts. Yo, kid, stop fronting on the grounds before you get touched. It's Canada Dry, Sess with a law, son. We won't ride. We want it so bad we might cry.
I have not done as much reading as you have from ancient Rome, but, you have talked about how, you're 46 years old, and you've told me, there are some things that you've read from from the history of ancient Rome that are still shocking to you.
Yes.
And you think, you verbalized to me, like, I don't know how I would have responded to this.
Yes.
When I was younger.
Yes.
And, when you do speak with younger people, you don't necessarily even recommend that they read these things because it is very disturbing.
It's so hard. It's so hard to deal with. Yes.
This is in no way justifying my disturbing, choices.
Yeah.
It is, I am just, expressing that I understand this is for mature audiences. And as much as, we might have an idea of what a podcast should be that's about,
Right.
politics, that's about philosophy, that's about, matters of real substance. And so, but this is the human reality that people do things for power, for sex, for,
Right.
meaning and purpose. And they will deceive themselves, they will lie to themselves, and they will lie to others in order to,
Right.
yeah,
No, and you're right, and that is very centrally what the ancient Latin literature is about, and that's why it's so disturbing and powerful today.
Yes, prostitution is a part of ancient texts, as you talked about with the Bible, basically
Yes,
being pro
yes.
prostitution. Islam, definitely a lot of stuff about sex that I think a lot
Sex
of
slavery.
sex slavery.
Yeah,
Yes, right.
sure, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. That people may feel uncomfortable confronting, or
Yep.
think that the idea of an intellectual a podcast about the life of the mind should just focus on matters of the mind. Well, okay. The human reality is that sex is a huge part of how we live our lives, and even if it's somebody who chooses to live in celibacy, as somebody who's a religious man and he decides, I'm going to live a life of celibacy, this
Right.
is still the choice. The rejection of human sexuality is still absolutely
that's right.
part of the life of the mind. I just say,
But look, if someone were to say to me that sex is meaningless, and people sometimes do, I have one friend now who identifies as asexual, and we do talk about the ways in which sex is meaningless. But compared to what? Wanting to love others and wanting to be loved, I don't think this is such a terrible thing. Unfortunately, it motivates people to do terrible things. But I don't think it's terrible in itself. I don't think it's terrible as a motivation. We know a lot of stand-up comedians. I've been talking to a lot of stand-up comedians lately. The jokes these guys tell are not worth remembering. They're not worth relating. They don't change the world anyway. They make no difference. And some of these guys, they tell different jokes every week. Some of them tell the same jokes over and over for 10 years. Obviously, these comedians I'm talking about, I'm not saying every comedian ever, the particular comedians, obviously, the women they have loved matter more than the jokes they've told. Obviously, the main significance of the jokes they've been telling is that it led to these women falling in love with them. And so, of course, there's no question. So in this sense, you can't tell me sex is meaningless. You can't tell me love is meaningless. You definitely can tell me that stand-up comedy is meaningless. In relative terms, this is a comparison. Now, okay, if you're comparing stand-up comedy to live rock and roll, okay, well, now stand-up comedy seems very meaningful compared to going and listening to heavy metal being performed live. There are other comparisons to deal with here. But yeah, I mean, people have a very hard time being honest about this. For me, male friendship, I'm heterosexual, being friends with men, it's not so different from falling in love with women. And if you've listened to this whole conversation with Melissa and I, you will have already maybe noticed this, that in some ways I talk to Melissa like a male colleague who's also engaged in living the life of the mind. If you do book reviews, and there are other people who can really appreciate the book reviews you're doing, and they do their own book reviews, maybe you can love each other. And maybe you can't make a difference in the Israel-Palestine peace process. And that is something you have to face up to, in contrast to the kind of delusions most of us have been raised with. For some of you, this will seem like a digression, and for some, you'll know exactly why I'm mentioning it. I stumbled on a YouTube channel about a month ago now, and this person had been uploading footage of themselves going to protests. I think it was over 25 years. They said, yeah, I first started going to these protests in this year before YouTube existed. And they record all these street protests and upload them week after week, month after month. And it was somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. Maybe it was Seattle. So it's, and if you scroll through the videos, you've got more than 10 years of these contrasting images of people holding up cardboard signs with the slogan of the week or the slogan of the year. And what crushes me, you can see how many hours this person has spent, and all these people have spent over a decade. It's like, that was your opportunity to read Tacitus. That was your opportunity to read Livy, to read Aristotle, to read Sallust, to read Appian. You tell me something really meaningful, something really profound, including and especially about politics. That's when you could have really learned what democracy is and what it isn't. You could have gained some profound insight into the world around you, including Israel-Palestine, for all I care. You could have done some reading and really learned the reality of the situation Israel is in as a republic in the 21st century, instead of just standing there on the street corner chanting slogans about it for many hours. Like you squandered, that opportunity. And they also squandered the opportunity to do an original research project on the politics of Central Asia. You know what I mean? Yeah. These were the days and the hours of your life. And these were hours where you weren't at work earning a living. You weren't busy with these other things that, for all of us have obligations. You weren't doing the dishes. You weren't showering and shaving or sleeping. Out of that finite pool of the hours you've got where you're not beholden to these obligations, you squandered it in this way. And for me, that's the pursuit of something unreal. It's the pursuit of a fantasy. It's a fantasy. It's a delusion about political power. And those other people on the street with you chanting, they aren't even your friends. So compared to that, yes, I think love is something very real. I think the value of love and sex is something very real compared to these kinds of delusions people live with. Every university campus I've ever been on, including Cambridge and Oxford, I meet women who will more or less admit to me they decided to get a PhD to meet a man. They're women doing PhD research to get laid. And I get it. And then they're disappointed because all the men at the university are either married or gay. I have real talk. I mean, these are conversations I've had, But no, women who want to lead an intellectual life and want to find men living an intellectual life, women who want to have this kind of high caliber partnership, the life of the mind and so on. It's not just about love. It's not just about, sure, I understand. So yeah, whether a woman decides to get a PhD or decides to put on a production of Shakespeare, sure, a lot of these things, they really are motivated by the yearning for love and the yearning for sex. And for most of us, if you're decent looking, it's attainable. And these other things are unattainable. So I'm sorry, but just to come back to some of the delusions of our time, obviously we can talk about ancient delusions, talk about ancient utopias. Human equality. And I've known teachers going through it. I've known teachers dealing with the delusions of equality. And I'm sorry, I won't tell the whole story. I remember telling this teacher, no, all of your students arrive unequal. And your job as a teacher is to make them more unequal. Education exacerbates inequality. The students who are smart are getting smarter. And the students who are stupid are falling further behind. And if you stick with the same cohort of students year after year, decade, that's it. It only gets worse. Like, this is it. She was shocked and she was horrified. But sure, a lot of people, millions of people, that's the fantasy. That's the political dream. And a lot of people are willing to sacrifice and struggle for that, for the dream of equality, of an equal society, and to treat people as equals and to be treated as equals. For some reason, you can't organize a basketball team that way. For some reason, you can't organize the army that way. There are all these things that challenge that notion of inequality. But the extent to which you're sacrificing something real in your life for something unreal, to act out a fantasy. See what I mean? In this way, it's subtle, and it creeps into the human experience everywhere all at once. Some people in the audience are going to know exactly what I'm talking about, and for some of you, that's going to be very hard to imagine. But the thing is about the Christian delusion about heaven, that's only after you die. Political ideas like equality, they're here and now. You see them everywhere. They're haunting you constantly. The ideas we have about democracy and so on, we're living with them. We're making sacrifices to those gods every day. And obviously people are very deceived about the distinction between what's real and what's unreal in politics.
Doomed Republic.